Hi, I'm Avery Otto, and the poet I chose is Edgar Allan Poe. And before you think, oh my gosh, she chose like the most basic poet, do you know anything about Edgar Allan Poe? Or do you just remember that you had to learn about him in high school or middle school? Because that's how I was, so that's why I chose him. Okay. Edgar Allan Poe was born in Boston, Massachusetts, January 19th, 1809. His parents were both professional actors, but died before Poe was 3 years old. At 3 years old, Poe was now put in an orphanage, but was later adopted. Poe's adopted parents owned a tobacco export, which enabled them to send Poe to the finest boarding schools and later led to him studying at the University of Virginia. His first year, he academically excelled, but accumulated a fair amount of gambling debt. His foster dad refused to pay off his debts and school, so Poe was forced to leave the university. He later enlisted into the United States Army. The year was 1827. That's where he began writing his poetry. None of his works got attention, though he continued to write and publish poems. In the following years, he was admitted into the United States Military Academy, but was also forced to leave due to lacking financial support. Edgar Allan Poe was most famous for writing narrative poems, and he was also known for writing very haunted terror tales, or I guess terror tales that included hauntings or just were kind of chilling to read. But he was also famous because many of his poems and stories were very relatable. Edgar Allan Poe was also the first author to try and make a professional living as a writer. His works, most of his poems or his works were inspired around the events that happened during his life and around him. He had a really weird life. Just kind of a side note, he married his 13-year-old cousin, which is probably why most of his poems were pretty messed up. No hate, but I just think that's pretty weird. Why Edgar Allan Poe should be added into the Intro to English major courses is because he teaches us many valuable lessons in writing and in life. He started from literally nothing, but continued to do what he loved even though his poems got little to no attention at the time and he was constantly being thrown out of different academies and universities because he had literally no money. He pushed boundaries, which is what all of us strive to do in our writing. He was never afraid to write exactly what he wanted, even if it wasn't popular or even unheard of. He was all around just very fascinating. I just think it was cool that he was writing horror way before his time. Like there were like horror stories at that time, but they were all pretty cheesy, and these ones were actually like relatable and true, and I guess just kept people on their toes and even keep people on their toes to this day. The poem I am close reading is called The Bells. It's one of Edgar's shorter poems, but this poem has an interesting eerie feel and is broken up into four parts, but each part is written in uneven stanzas. The poem also doesn't follow any specific rhyme scheme, but Poe rhymes so much within the poem that it almost sounds constant and kind of drives you crazy, which I think is another excellent, I guess, extra that he added to the poem to make it even more kind of heightened, and it added to the fact that in the poem the person or the narrator is kind of trying to describe a time when someone would be kind of going crazy or losing it. Before I do the close read, some of Edgar Allan Poe's other famous poems are The Raven, Annabel Lee, A Dream Within a Dream, Lenore, The Haunted Palace, and The City in the Sea. Bells, Part 1 and 3. Hear the sledges with the bells, silver bells. What a world of merriment their melody foretells! How they twinkle, twinkle, twinkle in the icy air of night, while the stars that oversprinkle all the heavens seem to twinkle with a crystalline delight. Keeping time, time, time in a sort of runic rhyme to the tintinnabulation that so musically wells from the bells, 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 from the jingling and the twinkling of the bells. This part is very happy, very light. Um, it almost seems like joyful, like the bells are a good thing. Part 3 is a little different, and that is this next stanza, next to part 1. It just changes the whole feel of the poem. Hear the loud alarum bells, brazen bells, what a tale of terror now their turbulence tells. In the startled ear of night, how they scream out of their affright. Too much horrified to speak, they can only shriek, shriek. Out of tune, in a clamorous appealing to the mercy of fire, in a mad exploitation with a deaf and frantic fire, leaping higher, 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 with a desperate desire, and resolute endeavor, now to sit or never, by the side of a pale-faced moon. Now, as you can tell, I guess I only read the first part, but the first two parts of this poem start off very happy, talking about how the bells are twinkling and jingling, and how they sing and are pleasant to listen to. He also talked about how the bells were hung up high near the heavens, where they dazzle in the sky. It all around almost sounds like a dream. However, in parts 3 and 4, the bells no longer sing, they shriek and scream, and are loud and constant. He also displays how the night time is the worst time the bells go off, because they sound startling now instead of pleasant and soft. The last part is the longest of all the parts. He talks about the bells being made of iron, and how the bells strike fear and horror into the listener's mind. He tells listeners about the bell keepers and how they aren't human, and how they are ghouls and horrible, and enjoy casting these amounts of fear into people's hearts. Poe is perhaps foreshadowing what it may feel like for someone who is losing their mind or is falling depressed. With the 4 parts, he's also using the bells as a metaphor for milestones in people's lives, because in childhood everything seems very wonderful, you have no worries, but at the end of your life you may have a very different outlook on things. I kind of feel like this poem relates to quarantine, because I feel like at the beginning all of us were very hopeful and we didn't think it would last that long, or we knew it would last long but we didn't really know how we'd feel. And now we're kind of like cringing at the fact that there's quarantine and that coronavirus is even a thing, but maybe that's just me. But yes, I think Edgar Allan Poe should be included in next year's classes or next semester's. I'm sorry if I didn't do too good on this. My computer's pretty old and I didn't know how to make this more entertaining. I'm sorry about that, guys, but I hope that you enjoyed this little video. Thank you.